Okay, so if we accept that it's probably a good idea to engage, invite feedback, for me, the best way to do that usually is in the simplest way to begin with. Yes, you can do all sorts of fancy solutions, but I've genuinely seen in the past when you're trying to gather feedback about a product, I've seen people with a clipboard. I've seen an actual box. You mentioned a suggestion box, Connor. I've seen that box sat there in the corner asking for feedback about the solution we're all using. Never got used. People used to put sweet wrappers in it and stuff. Um, I've seen surveys sent out an email. You're probably all familiar with them. Staff feedback surveys, all that great stuff, and buttons on consoles. I've seen kind of voting apps where you can rate content, and all of those do work genuinely. And there's probably dozens and dozens. Be very interested, actually, for those of you who did say yes, I've been involved in capturing feedback. How did you experience it? What kind of things happened for you? Just pop them in chat. I'd be really interested to hear. While you digest that, I'm going to say all those solutions I've just mentioned can work. So what I'm going to show you today, I thought I'd kind of combine two services that Connor and myself try and perform. One is to surface new stuff, and the other is to give you some value in this kind of mission of SharePoint Intranet. So today, I think we've got a fairly simple and really nice way to gather input, and that's using, as you said, Connor, the new list forms. So just a quick question again. Has anybody on the chat today, and there's quite a few of you I can see, which is fantastic, has anybody tried the new list forms yet, or even know what they are? Yeah, Valerie, love that.
Played around with it a little bit today for the first time, and yesterday actually, when we were, well, actually not yesterday, it was Sunday yesterday.
It was, honestly, I think this eclipse
this morning,
has
the whole weekend's been a bit of a blur. I feel like it's just been non-existent.
It's been a strange time with all the bank holidays. It's been a strange time, Connor. I'll just take a sip of water while I get some responses there.
Yeah, I was really impressed with what I played around with new forms. I didn't expect it to be able to do the sort of things that it was able to do. I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but
let's
pretty cool.
Let's have a little look, shall we? I'm just interested to see. I'm not going to stay on this view all the time, but I've just shared my screen here. Can everybody see sort of SharePoint there? Does it look clear for you? You've usually got a good eye for this. It's a little blurry, is it? Okay, I'll try this. If it becomes blurry, do shout out in chat. Do tell me. I'll just switch onto my main screen only without me on the camera, and I can put my lovely face back on. But you don't want to see me. You want to see list forms, is what I'm going to assume. As I say, so shout out if you can't
screen share. I think it would be better.
Okay, Connor, you've spoilt my good fun there. I'm really upset by that. Okay, fine. For those of you who are a bit nerdy like me, I was hoping to try out OBS, which is a screen capture tool, and you get nice little flexibility. But Connor's made me share this screen, so is that any better?
Yeah, perfect.
Good. Okay, let's just get my screen back now. Okay, so where was I? Where am I going with this? Yeah, so for the nerdy amongst you, this that you're going to see, if you know about the the Microsoft 365 roadmap, this is item 124865. I saw a couple of comments in chat about it just landing on their tenants. The official press releases say that this is available to, I'm going to call us more standard users, like the enterprise users, but also the educational licenses should have already got this, and they should be complete by the end of March. Now, I guess there are localizations. I guess there will be regional differences, but also licensing differences. And I'm going to guess that GCC or those government licenses might be a little bit more restricted. I do not know. But so apologies if you can't see this yet, but you will do very soon, I hope. So one thing to say is before I go into this new... Oh, could you just do me a favour and click mute on that, please, Connor?
Yeah.
Thank you, my friend. So do feel free to come off mute if you have a question. I would just ask you, if you don't, just pop yourself on mute. That'd be really helpful. I've seen this in the modern SharePoint interface, but I'm also seeing it in the what I call Microsoft Lists interface, and I'll try and surface that very shortly. And Chris, to your question, no, there was nothing that I had to do. That's not to say there might not be some administrative level tasks to do, but I believe when you see it, it's fairly evident that it's there and it's just a rollout. But we can dig into whether there is some level of enablement. I don't believe so, but please don't quote me on that because I could be talking through my nose. So, okay, what I'm going to talk about here is a use case. So I have a use case where I want to capture feedback. You can see here, Connor and I have been playing with this for a few weeks now. It's a really standard communication site. It might have some basic features on it. You might have news, you might have events, and we'll come on to those. But what I've designed in the background is a place to capture data for various different forms. So it might be data that's a suggestion as to what we might do in the future. It might be some feedback saying, look, your color scheme is terrible for accessibility needs. You need to change the contrast ratios. It might be, well, actually, I found this brilliant web part. You absolutely have to have it on this because that's the thing that I need to use. So in my use case, I have a list. Now, you won't see this list in the navigation here, and that's for a very good reason, because if I just pop to the list, through my site contents, you will see the wonders of my intranet suggestion box here. I've created this. Let's just say this is, I am the person empowered with making change or enabling change. And we don't want that change to be kind of widely spread. And we also don't want the data and the ideas about that change to be too widely spread. So I've created this list for now. I won't go too much into the details, but it's quite kind of traditional ideas of capturing feedback, getting suggestions from people, sticking them somewhere. So in this case, I've generated a list. You can see here I've got columns that include the headline for the idea, and Connor's very graciously added some details for me. We can ignore for now the fact I've got a blank column here. I'll come on to why that is in a moment. I've got details. So for anybody familiar with SharePoint, you'll start to recognize these kind of columns. They're pretty standard columns. I've got one here, which is a choice column. That's all great. So up to this point, all the same as what you might experience. I've got some columns in here I've added. We won't use these in the demo, but these are all about perhaps some onward processes. So my overarching idea is I'd like to make it easy to get information, to get ideas. I'd like to store them in a list, but I want to keep that list a little bit carefully curated, if you like, so it's not accessible to everybody. And then I want to be able to build Power Automate processes off the back of that list, which is, if you're familiar with SharePoint or Power Automate, dead easy. Traditionally, what I'd probably have reached for would be a form. So when I say form, I mean a form in the traditional sense under the Microsoft 365 umbrella. You've probably all seen them. You can create a form. You can make that form anonymously accessible. That form and its information stays with the form. Traditionally, what I've then done is I've had a Power Automate flow, which sucks data from the form, puts it in the list, thereby creating this separation. Has anybody ever done that out of interest? Is that a process you're experienced with? MS Forms drive me nuts. I think it's getting better, Steve, but you know, this I really like because that is a three-step process. Okay, so maybe me as an admin or someone working with SharePoint want to simplify that process. So, okay, I'm going to use Connor a little bit as my guinea pig, and we have kind of been playing with this in the background, so some of the experiences are a little bit different. But imagine I've got this list and I want to say to Connor, I need your input to make this better, or we should collaborate and you can give some input into the team so we can kind of capture that information. Well, I've got this button now, which you may or may not have spotted. Has anyone spotted this yet on their tenant? I'm going to click it while you think about that. This is where you launch forms from. Now, ignore the fact I've got a couple here. That's just in case, as with all these demos, things go wrong. But we've now got, it will feel familiar because it looks a bit like forms, but it isn't. We've got this new pop-up modal here, so we can create a new form. And what I can think about is, right, I'd like Connor as part of a wider team. And in fact, Connor could be anybody in my tenant, and that's really important. This could be for anybody in your tenant, and this data that I'm going to now capture can come to this list without those people accessing this list. So that's the key thing that I want to share with you. This is a way without Power Automate to get data to your list without exposing the list. So let's just go for, I'm going to call this ideas. just to make it clear for what Connor and I are doing. Now, the first thing to notice is, yeah, it does look like the forms interface here. That's interesting, Valerie. Yes, it's on your tenant, but you're not played with it. So, yeah, and do have a look for it, because you might find this is going to be useful in your use case. And I'll come on to some limitations in a minute, but it's really, really easy to design this form to interact with your list. And what I mean by that is I'd like Connor to give me some ideas. I'd like to get some more details about that ideas. I'm going to give him the ability to select from that choices field that I showed you earlier, but I've got process fields in here that I don't ever want him to see. So as you saw that, as I did it, as I click it off, those form entry items disappear. So that's quite nice. I've also got the ability to theme it a little bit. Now, yes, they're all fairly benign changes. I've not experimented with styles yet, but that's something that you could do to make this look a little bit more flashy. You've got some basic settings here. So what you can do is you can turn this form on and off, and you can say thank you for submitting your response. But really, to get data into this form, that's all you need to do. So you can preview it. Let's just have a quick preview. I don't like clicking things like previews when I'm full screen, because I always struggle to get back to where I was. But that's what it will look like to Connor when I send it to him. Okay, so I did it successfully then. Phew. Now, all you need to do now is take that link, and I'm going to come on to a better implementation of this in a minute, but it says send form. Really, all it's doing is it's giving you a link to copy. Now, if I send this to Connor, and I'm going to put it into chat because I want to test something here, which is a feature of this tool. This tool can be used now to add data to this list only by internally approved and authorized people on our tenant in our SharePoint domain, if you like. So I'm going to pop that link into the into the chat there. Now, I don't expect any of you in chat can use that, but I'd like Connor to just use that ideas demo to add an item, and then I can show you what that looks like. So while he does that, I'm just going to, I'll come on to limitations in a bit. I'm just going to show you another example of this kind of suggestion process where that's great. I've given Connor, and just give me a thumbs up, Connor, when you've typed something. And I'll come on to that question in a moment. That's a really good question.
Hey, I've submitted that for you.
You've submitted it, right? I'm going to have to do my little doodah there. This is a fantastic idea. So, and you'll just have to take our word for it. In the initial implementation of this, when I sent Connor that link, you couldn't access this list, could you?
No, I was receiving I believe it was something to do with permissions.
Access denied, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a 403 error.
Yeah, so that's all great. Now, we have noticed, and this is probably because of the way that Connor's set up on our tenant. Now, once Connor's received that invitation to input into this list via that form, he actually does end up having some level of access. I mean, you can even see it over here. He's gone now. He's come back. He's got the list open. There was a degree that Connor could see this list, but I believe in the truest sense, people won't be able to see the list. It'll just say no permissions, but you can still add data to the list. Now, that's one angle to this. Now, what happens if I want Connor to split his brain in two? And sorry for this, Connor. Sorry for doing this to you. I've now given you the ability to put some data into this list, but I want to now just really restrict and change the data you can add to this list. So imagine Connor's two people. And for the second version of Connor, maybe one with the T-shirt that fits him. Suggestion demo. This time, it's not suggestion, it's feedback. I have a dedicated group of people, and I only want them to be able to give me data that goes into my feedback column. Now, again, you've got all that stuff you're familiar with modern SharePoint. You've got the ability to move your columns up and down on the form. But again, I can click feedback headline, more details. I don't want Connor to be able to put the category in, imagining Connor's a different person right now. And again, don't want Connor to be able to do any of this. So again, it's generated form interaction for me. I'm going to click the form, copy the link, and send it. So now what's going to happen is Connor can come in and can put into specific columns the data that I've asked from him, and he hasn't had to interact with the data. I haven't had to create two lists. So again, it's about thinking a little bit about the use case that you might have and how you might want to use this suggestions box as to how you design your list. But the aspect of this I wanted to share with you is that you can start being quite granular about the information people can add to your lists without ever touching permissions, which is a thing that I always want to do because I'm not great with permissions, as an experiment Connor and I did earlier would prove. So I'll take a quick pause for breath because I'm now going to come on to some limitations, but I'll just quickly reflect on the chat. Okay. Now,
so you've got a question there about conditional input boxing.
Yeah,
so I'm assuming that is, I think, is it Pranam? She says that, or he says, sorry for assuming your gender. It says, can certain boxes be grayed out based on other inputs? So let's say, for example, you had a checkbox, a yes or no column in here that you wanted on your form. If you was to click yes, could you then provide different views, questions, and form entries based on certain selections?
Yeah, I know what you're saying there. So, because you can do that in forms, can't you, right now? So my belief is, and I haven't tried it, so it is something that I will try after this, is that we are a little limited. So I'll go through some of those limitations. Actually, it's a good time to lean into that, Connor. So one thing that you can do, if, for example, I have a validation criteria on my idea headline, let's just pick that one for the sake of argument. You can set that up. So if I just go and what am I doing? No, let's not do that one. Let's go into feedback headlines. Edit this one. If, for example, I put a maximum number of characters of 10 on that column or 100 or whatever, the form that I'm sending out will respect that. Okay, so that's one benefit. It just pops up, and I don't know if we can show that, Connor. Let me just try and show that for people. So one thing you can do is you can let's just open it up. You can limit what people can put in. Let's just see if I'll do a preview and show you what that looks like. I think it was this one. So let's just put in loads of stuff and try and submit. Yeah, there you go. That's the experience you get. If you have column level validation, that will work. To my knowledge, as I said, I don't believe you have the ability to do conditional, but what you can do, which is quite nice, again, it's horses for courses a little bit, if that's a phrase that makes sense for you. You might not choose this if you want a lot of conditional branching logic, because I don't believe it yet you can do it. We've got options here to do things like, well, all right, you can't add attachments at this stage. You can't allow people to edit their entries at this stage. I'm sure these things will come, but at this stage, this is my experience of what we've got. So one thing you could do is start to get a bit creative and say, all right, people can't add attachments. If those attachments are stuck somewhere, it's a link or something, well, maybe I'll add a link. You can start to build your columns as you go. So I'm going to add a hyperlink column here. This isn't just adding it to the form. You'll see in a minute it's going to add it to the SharePoint list. So let's just call it URL for the sake of argument. It's not required. I think that's all I need to do. Just click off it, make sure that has saved. Okay, so that's saving the changes. That's now implementing to the list. And that has popped up over there. So you can do things like that at this stage. But yeah, so there you go, Connor. Thank you for putting that data in. You can separate your kind of pathways for people putting data. But as I've seen it, I don't believe that you can do that conditional logic. So just again, reflecting on the chat there, sounds like a way to make group view that some of us have been waiting for a long time. If we have a field containing a button, will it appear as a button? That's interesting. I would have to check that because I know what you mean. If you've got a JSON formatting, I haven't got a good example that I can quickly find, but that is one that if I've got time at the end, I'll go and find a list, see how that JSON formatting manifests in the column. Because we have a list which has got JSON formatting, which has an approve or reject in it. And visually, you can approve or reject an entry, and it'll fire a Power Automate flow, as you're saying there. Apologies, so, I can only see UU, so I don't know who that's. Pranam, I think it was.
Just one thing to consider with that is obviously that when you create for example, in your point there, John, a button using JSON, the button is pointing to a value that exists in that list. Now,
Yeah.
My assumption would be that obviously we're using this new forms experience. If we're sending out this form, then there's not going to be any value inside of that list. That's what the form is there to do. It's designed to create that item. So you're essentially, I don't think that would work because the button wouldn't actually be pointing to anything at that point in time.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'd like to go and see what it looks like within the form, so I will do that afterwards if I have time. And I'll do a quick post on the recording of this, Pranam, and you can have a look at what that looks like. But I think you're right. Connor, right
that was my point. I was trying to get is there is no button field.
There's nothing
inside.
No,
you'd be
it's just a column.
Adding a hyperlink, and that hyperlink is essentially just a text input. Sorry, an actual hyperlink column type. And obviously, from the form view, you'd have no value for it.
No. So, no, thank you, Connor. Yes, absolutely right, and really, really good to clarify that what you're really seeing here is it's a window into the slots where you can place data, but you're not seeing the data, and that's the fundamental thing here, which is great. Same with a form, a Microsoft form. You're not really interacting with the data in the list if you've got Power Automate to take it and put it into the list. So that's all great. But for the final part of what I want to share with you is, again, we go back to making it easy. I don't really want to send links everywhere. I don't want to make people go to a link if already I'm starting to encourage them to come to my SharePoint intranet. So what would you do? And this is where my screens in this format they're gonna twist my melons because I never get this right. So what would you do if you wanted to invite someone to use those forms? Well, there's probably any number of ways you could do it, but one really nice one that I kind of quite like is if we go into your communication site, we use the quick links. So if I click on this quick link here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that quick link to be, let's just get my form up. Let's just, for the sake of argument, choose the feedback, copy the link. Let's go and put that into here. We'll call this feedback. And it's going to be, I'm just going to change this link here. I'm going to choose that current link that I've just created. That is the form link. So what this is going to do now, I'm going to also add an icon. For some reason, the icon's blank. Don't like that. Feedback, Connor. Megaphone.
Yeah, it's a common one, isn't it?
Used. Yeah. So again, playing back into what Connor said 2 weeks ago now, using images, it's like it shortcuts the brain somehow. I don't know how this actually works to be a psychological process, but we're trying to use images as much as we can, as well as words, because words are important to screen readers and all that good stuff to work. So let's just republish that. Now, that is one way that you might implement a really quick clicking form to let somebody go to that list. And now Connor could do that. Anybody could do that who's got access to that SharePoint site. Put the feedback in. You can obviously see that I've added my new columns in for that form. But it's a nice, quick way to give people access. And in the same way, I'll just very, very quickly go back and do the other one so you can see what we might do in this area. We might edit the quick links, add a new quick link if I can remember where I'm clicking. It's here, isn't it? Add a link. There we go. Do another quick link. Get my horrible screen sharing. Let's go for the ideas demo. Copy a link. Paste another link in. Add that. And this one, let's call this, this was suggestions, wasn't it? Something like that. Again, I'd always probably encourage, as Connor would, change the icon, and that might be a light bulb. Nope. That's me typing and saying the same thing at the same time. So hopefully with that, you could see I'm playing back into that idea of meet people where they are. If you want people to use your intranet, make it dead easy to make a suggestion, give feedback. You know, you could put a poll in here. You could do all sorts of things, but I love this idea that we've now got the ability to capture data in that list really easily for people. And then going back to the list itself, what I might be inclined to do is I might be inclined to build little Power Automate flows which approve and reject items, give feedback to people, ask for more information, set them off to reviewers. As you can see with all these columns, we can start to do automation. So in a nutshell, that's what I wanted to share with you. Apologies, it's gone on a little longer than I planned, Connor. But yeah, so any questions that you have, Connor, or questions in chat?
Yeah, I'm just having a look. Plum's been quite active. Saying, how will this appear on a phone? Will this pop up on the SharePoint app or a browser window?
Oh, that's interesting, that one. Yeah, I don't really use SharePoint on my phone, but we can go and have a look.
It's exactly what I said. Is I don't think I've ever used SharePoint on my phone. It seems like too overly complicated for a phone, but I'm interested to try it now.
Yeah, but to answer that question around column validation formulas, as you saw on the demo there, I've put really basic column validation in. Let's just have a very, very quick look. What else I might do? Let's have a look at what I could do here. Column validation. I mean, I'm going to assume that if there was a formula here, it would manifest in the same way. All I did is I put 10 characters in, which is effectively doing some level of oh, I said the word level twice then. Some level of like underlying code is taking place. Yeah, so attachments, as you saw on there, attachments don't seem to be catered for yet. So I could not add, for example, the ability, could I? No, I can't give someone the option to create an attachment through this form. If they wanted to do that, I might be inclined to use a Microsoft form in the truer sense, or do that in a different process. That's where I would lean into right now.
Yeah, I think that's a good one to point out there as well, is that obviously that this does have some limitations as to what you can and can't do to the list. That's where I think you were saying that forms probably gives you a little bit more control at this kind of point in time while this is evolving.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think just on that as well. I mean, when I'm thinking about the reasons when I'm using a suggestion box or a feedback form of some sort. I remember when I used to work at cinema, we'd often ask our employees to come and actually tell us like their thoughts, be honest and all that. And one of the things that never used to happen was no one was honest because we were tracking their names. It wasn't until we realised that because people knew that we were tracking their names, they weren't going to kind of it wasn't promoting honesty in the workplace.
Yeah.
People were just kind of doing what they thought you wanted to hear. So yeah, does basically, I'm going to ask you the question: can we anonymize these forms?
So my experiment so far has suggested no. You'll see it right down here. All those forms. The key message there is that link that I gave to you and I popped in the chat there, that's accessible to people in general on our tenant. Now, when those people add information using that form, it's got the created by. Yes, you can create views. Yes, you could probably obfuscate that information somehow, but not out the box. Not like when you do a Microsoft form, for example, you've got that anonymous input and it is true anonymity. We practiced that word earlier, didn't we, Connor? It's truly anonymous, and if you want to set that up, you can. I haven't yet found a way that I can say give my feedback anonymity, and I'm guessing that's because of this inherent link into SharePoint. So you've got to have a presence on the tenant, so it's exploiting whatever update mechanism that's using.
Because when you do that through like the older method that we've commonly used to, which is the forms into Power Automate into SharePoint list, you're able to kind of predefine the created by and all that sort of stuff as part of that Power Automate flow, so you can hide things. So yeah, it'd be nice to see that in the future. That become a feature.
We're seeing this all the time, aren't we? Things are it's a natural agile process. It's released and then it's updated. I think this particular one, James will attest to this. It's been a long release path for this, but now we've got it. I like some of what it's offering us. I think I'm kind of quite keen to see more.
Yeah, and yeah, just one other question as well. I mean, you mentioned about perhaps embedding your form directly onto a page. I saw how you just used the quick links there. You got time to show us how we can embed?
I think we have. Yeah, we had a little play with this, didn't we? And I quite like it because my thought process went, well, normally, so Microsoft Forms, let's just show you where my thought process went. I thought, well, okay, links are great, it's fantastic. If I have a form, so what I keep referring to as Microsoft Forms, I can embed. Let's just imagine this is a page and it's a page where I want to direct people to. I can embed the whole form visually into the page. Can I do that with list forms? Well, I started to look around here the web parts we get. And we don't yet have a web part that's going to allow us to do that. But what we do have is quite a versatile tool. It's the embed. So could we embed those forms? Because it's just a URL, right? God, that's a hard word to say. Here's what I baked earlier. So it's no spoiler. This should work. You can pop it into an iframe. Now, yeah, I got the wrong link. If you'll bear with me a sec, I've got a new link, but you can pop it into an iframe and it will show up. So let me just copy the link from there. The bit that's not playing is actually the form link because I have since changed it. And if you will bear with me, I will put the right one into there. Go on, you're going to work now. There you go. So yes, you can put them into pages. The structure is a little bit awkward, but if you know how to put an iframe on a URL, you're all right, you're safe. If you don't, we can give you some examples, and in fact, probably what I will do, I will just copy the example into chat.
Yeah, if you're interested about learning about iframes, W3 Schools is a good place to go. It teaches you all about kind of HTML formatting and all that sort of stuff, because essentially what an iframe is. You can do quite a lot of cool things.
Yeah, and I think it's quite a nice way to do it, isn't it, Connor? If you said, well, maybe that link just takes you to a page where you've got that form. Again, it depends what you really want to create in the interaction. You're probably 2 or 3 clicks away then from someone putting data in, but maybe to your point, you just have this shrunk down and have it in a page and make it look pretty. You could probably do all of that.
Just to put up discussion, I believe that you can do that. I know that there is embed tools in inside of the rich text editor on Outlook. I believe simply yes is the answer to that. You should be able to do it, because again, it's HTML tags, which is what the embed should recognize.
Yeah,
or
I mean,
you pin this to a Teams tab.
Yeah,
again, it's all possible.
Yeah, I'm going to assume it's just a SharePoint page, and when you've got that SharePoint page exposed in a Teams tab, it's going to expose the content as an embed. It's just an embedded thing in an embedded thing almost. But yeah, to the point about emails, I think you would want to exercise some care there, only because, for example, you've got to make sure that who you're sending it to does have the tenant rights. Effectively, they can put things in. Thanks, Connor. So
just one thing before I quickly hand back over to John, and I probably haven't got time to demo this, but obviously you guys, if you spend enough time in lists and document libraries, you obviously know about views, configuring views as well, and that kind of also goes back to, and again, it's not a foolproof way of creating an anonymous entry list, but you could,
well done.
You could, for example, create a view that doesn't expose the created by date. What other cool things you could do here is, obviously John's got multiple forms with the categories system in here as well. You could like filter and create views based on the categories, so that way you can see exactly the right information that you want to look at. If you're looking at maybe implement some new features, you want to look at the new features category, you could do that from in here as well. But again, I think John's mentioned this already, but just to again echo this, is the great thing about this is the way that John's structured this suggestion box means that, for example, people responsible for different aspects of your intranet build, or build in general, you can use Power Automate against the back of this list. So you could say when a new item arrives in SharePoint, you can go off and do something. So it works exactly the way a SharePoint list usually would. So you can, like, for example, send alerts, send emails to the relevant departments and the relevant teams to kind of take action on these suggestions and feedback that you've got.
Yeah, thank you, Connor. Yeah, it's not a demo we've got time to do, but I just shared on screen there the fact that the view, you may not see this yet, but we've got the tabbed view in SharePoint now, so it makes it a little bit more intuitive, and then a little plus icon next to it. The idea of creating views now definitely adds value. So we're starting to get to that place where it makes life a lot easier to separate. But I like the fact that I can have a bucket of information, and then based on what you've just said there, creating those segmentation without having to be overly fussy about permissions. That's the big thing for me. It's just not a fussy solution. It will not fit all problems right now. But again, you might lean more into forms to do the more complex things and Power Automate. So yes, and you're right, James. Views are not capable of securing the information, but as an organizational tool for you at the heart of the data, that might be really useful for you. So I hope that was useful. I hope you've seen something you were interested in. I'd be very interested to hear in chat whether you think that was useful to what you might need to use, whether you would use it, what you would use it for, or whether you just think it's a whole big bag of spanners. Some of these things that we see at different stages in their life cycle can be a little bit underwhelming, but for this one, it's smelling a little bit useful to me. I don't know if I'd reach for it straight away, but to me, certainly I'd give it a solid kind of 6 out of 10 as a start. That's where I would be.